Balance of Power, live from Washington, D.C.
From Bloomberg's Washington, D.C. studios to our TV and radio audiences worldwide, welcome to Balance of Power. I'm Joe Matthew. Tonight, the White House circles the wagons after President Trump moved to fire Fed Governor Lisa Cook.
The president absolutely has authority to fire a Fed governor for cause. And I think the accusations are serious. And I look forward to seeing the outcome.
We'll discuss the looming legal fight with Cook's lawyer set to file suit against the White House when we talk to President Trump's former special counsel, Cobb, up ahead. Plus, the Trump administration making good on threats to raise tariffs on India up to 50% as punishment for the country buying Russian oil. But will it be effective? White House senior counselor Peter Navarro joins us live to talk about what those tariffs mean for the future of U.S.-India relations. And Nvidia sinking after the close. We'll dive into the company's earnings report out after the bell with concerns now about Nvidia's revenue forecast and still big questions about its China business in the earnings call that's getting underway right now. That is where we begin this evening as investors react to Nvidia's quarterly results, sending the stock lower in after-hours trading. We've been down just about 3% for a bit here with concerns in the market over Nvidia's revenue forecast. Let's get right to the details now with Bloomberg's Caroline Hyde, co-host of Bloomberg Tech, and Bloomberg The Close co-anchor Romaine Bostick. They're both with us from World's headquarters in New York. Caroline, what seems to be the problem?
Well, the problem is that they met expectations, not exceeding them. And I think many would say, actually, if you look at the Bloomberg intelligence interpretation of all of this, actually it was a pretty nice in line, if not slightly above, for the fiscal second quarter. And the third quarter was incredibly noisy, Joe. We talked about this earlier in the day, the fact that the $15 billion spread between the top end of revenue expectations from the street to the bottom end for the forecast, well, that forecast comes in basically in line with that. And that's with many interpreting that China's revenue would be included. It's not. H20 sales did not happen in the second quarter, and no H20 sales have been factored in to the fiscal third quarter. Therein lies the concern, and I think that's something that Jensen Huang can explain away if he does indeed discuss the idea that, look, this could only be upside to the fiscal third quarter if they are allowed to sell more broadly into China. And I think, Romaine, you can comment on the fact that actually there is litigation risks that surround this ongoing U.S. government call for a 15% cut in any H20 sales.
Yeah, and I want to go there, Joe, because just a few moments ago, they filed a 10Q with the SEC, and kind of buried at the bottom of it, they talk about that agreement earlier this month, Joe, that President Trump announced that effectively he would grant a license for Nvidia to sell those H20 chips to China, but would take 15% of the revenue. I'm going to read specifically what Nvidia had to say. It says any request for a percentage of the revenue by the U.S. government may subject us to litigation, increase our costs, harm our competitive position, and benefit competitors that are not subject to such agreements. Now, obviously, this gets into a little bit of legalese here, but it seems to get to the point, Joe and Caroline, that whatever agreement Trump announced earlier this month, apparently that is not quite a done deal.
Yeah,
well, that's pretty fascinating, Romaine. We've been talking about this a lot since that news emerged in Caroline. That was supposed to involve AMD as well. Is that not real?
And if you cast back your mind to Lisa Su joining our program just before that agreement was made with the U.S. government, her stock was getting beaten up because she couldn't give any expectation for what China's sales were going to look like. And the street and investors did not like that. So once again, I think the lack of clarity coming from Nvidia is a difficult one. And to your point, Romaine, they said at the moment they're receiving 15% of the revenue generated from licensed H20 sales, the government. But to date, Nvidia says the U.S. government has not published a regulation codifying such a requirement. You're seeing something else, Romaine.
I just want to also bring to our viewers' attention, Joe, and this is really important for your audience here. In this 10Q, they spend several paragraphs, a lot, I mean, several pages, in fact, talking about the relationship with the U.S. government, talking about the relationship with the Chinese government. They go into detail not only about that 15% agreement, but also about legislative proposals in Congress, as well as other things that, in its words, says are a potential threat to its business, particularly if some of those proposals and some of those agreements aren't applied across the board to all of the competitors here. It's going to take a while for us to dig through this here, but a potential risk for Nvidia investors, and more importantly, something to chew on for all you folks down there in Washington.
Really interesting developments here, and this call is just now beginning. So the trajectory of the stock after hours could change, and we'll stay close to Caroline Hyde, host of Bloomberg Tech. Bloomberg's Romaine Bostick as well will be back with us later this hour. We thank you both. To the latest now on President Trump's effort to fire Fed Governor Lisa Cook, as Cook's attorney prepares to file a promised lawsuit against the administration. Bloomberg's Michael McKee joins us now live from our Boston bureau with more. Are we going to see that suit today, Michael?
We aren't sure. We've anticipated its filing today, but it has not happened yet. It could happen in the next few hours, we're told, or it may slip into tomorrow. But it will kick off a major legal battle with the White House on two fronts. One, does the president have the right to fire a Federal Reserve governor, and what is the bar for cause to do so? Does the mortgage problem that she has rise to that level? But the other, Joe, is more interesting in the short run. She is going to ask for an injunction to prevent the president from removing her from office until the major case is adjudicated. If she wins, she stays on. Trump loses. If she loses, if they let her get fired, as they did with the Merit Systems Protection Board and the National Labor Relations Board, then you have a really weird situation where there is an opening. The president could theoretically fill it, and yet the Supreme Court at the end of all this could say he illegally fired her and give her her job back. But that person who filled in would have voted at Fed meetings. They'd be on the job. What would the status of all that be? So it's going to be a very interesting case, and we assume that she probably will win the temporary injunction and that it will probably happen very quickly because, of course, they want to get this done by September 17th, the next Fed meeting.
Really interesting, as we now expect Stephen Myron's confirmation hearing to move up to next week. That conversation just probably got a lot more interesting as well. Bloomberg's Michael McKee, thank you so much for the update. And for more on this looming legal fight, we're joined by Ty Cobb, former federal prosecutor, former special counsel to President Trump during the first administration. Ty Cobb, welcome back. It's good to see you. Do you agree with Michael McKee? Absolutely. When it comes to this injunction, what will Lisa Cook learn?
I think that she's likely to prevail. You know, the purpose of injunction typically is to balance a variety of things, you know, harm to the parties, likelihood of success on the merits, and is usually designed to fashion a remedy intended to preserve the status quo. The status quo is she's a Fed member. On the likelihood of success on the merits, it's very hard to see how Trump's attempt to be jury, judge, and executioner on, you know, mere allegations at this stage of the game that, you know, never before prosecuted in any way. Not something that would typically be seen to rise to the level of malfeasance or corruption associated with the traditional meaning of for cause. Hard to see how he, you know, strains the limits of his presidential power more by getting this accomplished. So I think the courts are likely to resist this.
If this does go to the Supreme Court, we have covered some of this ground before. We've been hearing a lot about Trump versus Wilcox, right? The Federal Reserve, a uniquely structured quasi-private entity, the court said, that follows in the distinct historical tradition of the first and second banks of the United States. So do we actually know how this ends?
Well, that was said in February, so, you know, that's not ancient. And I think the court is likely to, you know, sustain that position with regard to a Fed member. You know, it's complicated because they clearly are on a mission at some point to overrule Humphrey's executor, which is the Keystone opinion from 1935 that authorizes independent congressional agencies. But as you mentioned in the opening, the court has already this year, on at least two occasions, made it very plain that the president has that power as the executive. But as you just pointed out, the Fed is really different. The court has said that it's different. Even Alito has indicated that he views it as differently. So I think with Roberts, Alito, and Kavanaugh, who've suggested that's their views, and the remaining judges, many of whom will agree, I think it's unlikely that the president prevails at the Supreme Court, assuming this case gets there.
Okay, got it. You know, we've heard from both the president and the Fed chair, Jay Powell, that they will abide by the court's decision. You take them both at their word?
I take Chairman Powell at his word.
I guess that answers that question. Interesting. You know, it's obvious that you've been critical of the president in the past, Ty Cobb, and you've even appeared on a list that we've talked about in the past. And I wonder, after seeing John Bolton's house raided, if you've been checking your door.
It's funny. As you know, I was interviewed recently about that, and I flippantly said that when I heard about it, I went down and locked my door.
Was that flippant?
I'm not thinking about it 24/7, but I think that his retribution and vengeance campaign is on full display. You've got Bolton, you've got Chris Christie recently, you've got all the prosecutors who investigated him, all the prosecutors who prosecuted January 6th thugs and protesters, all the FBI people who were involved in those investigations. So I mean, he has a long track of vengeful actions, and it's not going to stop until either Congress, the courts, or somebody makes him stop. There was a good move yesterday, frankly, by Judge Cullen in Maryland when he prevented the president's effort to force out all Maryland federal judges from one of the immigration cases. Judge Cullen from Virginia, who was assigned the case because the other judges had been recused from that, made it very plain that the judges are getting tired of the name calling and the assault on their authority and the third branch of government. He highlighted in a footnote that the president had called federal judges left-wing, liberal, activist, radical, politically minded, rogue, unhinged, outrageous, overzealous, unconstitutional, crooked, and worse, and made it clear that that was unprecedented and unfortunate. Ideally, the courts will be able to continue in that mode and return the presidency to the norms that have guided us for 250 years. But a lot of damage has been done, particularly the Justice Department, the FBI, and internally within the government.
Ty Cobb, great to have you back. Former federal prosecutor, former counsel to President Trump in the first administration. We appreciate the insights. As we turn now to get the view from the administration, joined here in studio by Peter Navarro, White House Senior Counselor for Trade and Manufacturing. Mr. Navarro, welcome back. I was going to ask you first about tariffs, but because Ty Cobb, by the way, there's nothing awkward about having Peter over the house when Ty Cobb is on the phone. He was talking about...
It's a great time. I'm glad to be here.
I'm glad you heard everything he said.
Congratulate Kelsey on her
Kaylee had... Yes, well, thank you very much.
Yeah.
I'll let her know that
her
you said.
Boy.
Beautiful boy.
Named her Price. If she had twins, the jokes was she would have named the other one Earnings or Volume, which...
I'll have to ask her that.
She'll be sitting in the chair with us soon.
Well, I hope that's true.
Okay.
We'll see Kaylee Lines in a couple of weeks. With regard to Lisa
Okay,
Cook...
let's talk about this.
Why not wait to find out if she's going to be charged?
What a hateful anti-Trump guy. I mean, start with Bolton. I mean, Bolton, what Ty Cobb could have pointed out was Judge Royce Lamberth
I saw your op-ed
ruled
this week in the Hill.
that John Bolton likely jeopardized national security, gambled with national security, and the Trump administration would have likely prevailed on the merits of the case if it had gone forward and Trump had been reelected. Now, that would have meant likely jail term for John Bolton. So don't tell me, Ty Cobb, that we're going after John Bolton. Needlessly, that guy took, by his own admission, copious notes in places like the Situation Room, in places where national intelligence secrets were being done, and then he cashed in on that with his memoirs, and he's just been out of control ever since. He's a threat to national security. The guy should be investigated if they find he's got what we think he might have. that guy should go to a federal prison.
Why not the same approach to Lisa Cook? Why not wait to find out the results
so
of the
let's talk Lisa Cook.
Yeah.
So here's the thing. This is a very interesting case. The way the statute reads is that the president unequivocally has authority to fire for cause. In this case, the cause would be malfeasance. So what do we know here? What we know here appears to be a slam dunk damning case. What do we got? I couldn't believe this when I saw this. Two mortgage
applications, yeah.
In 2 weeks, where she put on,
to be full-time
she both
residents.
claimed they were her permanent residents.
Yes.
The way the rules are, you got to occupy within 60 days and stay there for at least a year. I mean, by the math of it, you can't do that in 2 houses. Okay, so on the face of it, that's malfeasance. Now, the statute doesn't say the malfeasance has to happen while you're in office in the Fed. It just says malfeasance. Now, look at the history. I mean, we've had, I can go 20 names of people who left administrations because of allegations like this under a scandal.
The appearance or impression of impropriety.
I mean, one of the
in
guys,
this case, though, because
but
people are already asking you about politicizing the Fed, why not embrace due process?
This is due process. The president has the power to do exactly what she's doing. Fire her for cause, in this case, malfeasance. Now, for those who, look, Nixon resigned without a trial. We had the whole Contra thing. Those people were gone without a trial.
She says she's suing you tonight.
The ones that's most relevant here is the independent agency guys who were fired by Biden. One of my good friends, Mark Calabria, was at an agency, and he got fired, and the court said Biden had every right to do it. So what's going on
Have
here?
you imagined a world in which she gets the injunction and she stays in that job while this criminal investigation is underway and Donald Trump is sitting in the White House truthing at her every day? How ugly could this get?
Look, when she got appointed, Joe,
Yeah.
Back when I was outside and Biden was the appointee, I said flat out, it was a terrible hire. It was a DEI hire. She's not qualified. But you look at the arc of what she has done as Fed governor. She was the one who was one of Jay Powell's votes to keep rates artificially low as the inflation crisis began because of Biden's overspending. She fed into the inflation is transitory narrative, which was pure partisanship, and she was the one who helped light the inflationary spiral that we've been fighting with ever since. And then Trump gets in there. What does she do? She flips, and it's like partisan again. It's like she won't lower rates. She's a partisan animal who weaponized the Federal Reserve. This is not about Fed independence. It's about, I mean, think about it, Joe. 2 mortgages in 2 weeks claiming falsely. Now, here's the thing. This is personal to me.
Oh, I understand.
When I went
Using language like animals.
I went to prison. I went to prison, Joe, for defending the Constitution. And when I was in there, which is why this is relevant, is there were at least 2 guys I knew in there who were in there for a long time for similar charges. And you don't only go to prison, you get your assets seized, there's forfeiture, and generally there's restitution that has to be paid. So this is not, folks, this is not a slap on the wrist. This is not a little thing. I mean, people are in prison. And what does it say about the world if she tries to hide behind the fact that she hasn't had a trial yet, when in fact the facts are the facts, and it doesn't require a trial?
I read your view on that. Yeah. I don't think you don't want to call Lisa Cook an animal. You didn't mean that.
A what?
An animal?
I didn't say that.
Well,
I didn't mean to say
you said
that.
partisan animal. I
partisan
want to make sure
animal.
that we understand what you mean.
I understand.
So, but
I apologize.
Okay, fine. I just want to give you. I don't want you to leave without.
A partisan. I mean, look. It's just a figurative term.
Should we investigate everyone who disagrees with Donald Trump?
Of course not. But that's not what this is about.
It's not.
It's absolutely not.
This is about the mortgage applications.
It's not what that's about.
Not what she did before.
Walked out of the White House in a huff. And the only thing he shares with Ty Cobb, proves my thing, never trust a guy with a handlebar mustache, because both of them have that. He walks out with a stack of copious notes, screwing both the president and everybody works with, and he goes and what it looks like to Judge Royce Lambert, don't ask me, it looks like he relied on information that should otherwise have not seen the light of day under 4 possible different statutes. And if he did that, as Royce Lambert said,
Okay.
you know,
I've never talked to you for this long without bringing up tariffs, you know.
Yeah.
We got India today.
Let's do that.
50%. Are we actually in talks with India right now? Is there a potential for a deal to change that number?
Look, it's real easy. India can get 25% off tomorrow if it stops buying Russian oil and helping to feed the war machine.
Not sending that signal.
They're not. And look, here's the thing. I'm puzzled, okay, because Modi's a great leader. These people this is a mature democracy with intelligent people running it. And they look us bald-faced in the eye on the tariff part and say, we don't have the highest tariffs in the world, when, in fact, they do. There's no dispute about that if you look at the numbers. And then they say, oh, we're not going to stop buying Russian oil. Now, what does that mean? I mean, we've talked about this, but it's worth talking to your viewers again. When India buys Russian oil at a discount, and then Indian refiners in partnership in India with Russian refiners make that and sell it at a premium to the rest of the world, right? Russia uses the money it gets to fund its war machine, kill more Ukrainians, and then the next thing that happens, of course, is Ukraine comes to us and Europe and says, give us some more money. So everybody in America loses because of what India is doing. The consumers and businesses and everything lose, and workers lose because India's high tariffs cost us jobs and factories and income and higher wages. And then the taxpayers lose because we got to fund Modi's war, okay? The road to peace runs at least partly right through New Delhi.
War?
I mean Modi's war.
Let me ask
because the road to peace runs in part through New Delhi. I mean, that's a lot of money.
It's a lot of money.
It's a lot of money.
But there are some who say that we're losing leverage with China by eliminating the next biggest economic alternative.
You know, I'm so tired of these national security strategists being too cute by half. The reality is you got to stop India and China from buying Russian oil. You do that tomorrow when the war's over. Okay? The war's over. If everybody, including Europe, this is like Europe's still buying Russian oil, which is crazy. Okay? If people just stop buying Russian oil, then it's only a matter of time before Putin doesn't have the money to fund that war. So Modi's a big part of it. It's 1.5 million barrels of oil a day. That buys a lot of drones and bombs to kill Ukrainians. Okay, a lot. Okay, so what's troubling to me, Joe, is that the Indians are so arrogant about this. They say, oh, we don't have higher tariffs. Oh, it's our sovereignty. We can buy oil from anyone we want. India, you're the biggest democracy in the world, okay? Act like one. Side with the democracies. You're getting in bed with the authoritarians. You know, China, you've been at quiet war with them for decades. They invaded Aksay Chin and all your territory. These are not your friends, folks, okay? And the Russians, I mean, come on.
With a direct appeal to the listeners and viewers here.
Yes, I love India.
Power. Peter Navarro, it's great to have you back, as always. White House Senior Counselor for Trade and Manufacturing. Thank you for the insights. We've got a big breaker on our hands here. Of course, that's Nvidia earnings. The call is underway right now after posting results that left some investors wanting, at least with regard to the revenue forecast. We get back to Bloomberg Tech host Caroline Hyde in New York City for the very latest headlines. Caroline, what are we learning on the call?
Joe, thank you. CFO Colette Kress is speaking, giving more granularity to the outlook on China. Look, we have seen a 56% increase in revenue for the fiscal second quarter. They're in line for their third quarter expectations, but the street wanted to hear more. And in particular, we're used to Nvidia managing to go beyond our wildest expectations. They're even handing back $60 billion in terms of a dividend. But however, well, not dividend, in terms of just buying back shares. But more broadly, Joe, what we're starting to hear is the devil in the detail when it comes to China. Kress, the CFO, is saying, look, they could actually sell $2 to $5 billion worth of H20 chips, could be shipped to China if these geopolitical and other issues are resolved. Now, remember, they also articulated in that 10Q that because of this 15% agreement with the US government to give 15% of any revenues of H20s to the US government, it could expose Nvidia to future litigation. So that's a key risk for them. At the moment, Crest says Nvidia is on track to get this, book $20 billion worth of sovereign AI revenue this year. This is what investors and analysts want to hear. They are diversifying away from just those 4 key hyperscalers, the Alphabets, the Metas, and the like. We're also hearing them tout what is the capital expenditure from those customers that make out about 40% of revenue. Figure she says is $600 billion in this calendar year. So they're trying to talk big on the expertise and the opportunity here in the GPU sector. They say that at the moment, Rubin's already set to be back on track and seeing the next iteration of their chips and their architecture is going to be living up to expectations, coming online next year. And they're already in the fabs, is what the CFO says. And also at the moment, they've managed to really hit pace when it comes to the Blackwell architecture too.
Well, what a great readout from Bloomberg's Caroline Hyde. Thank you so much, Caroline. We'll let you get back on the call as I realize there could still be some more news here. And coming up, we're going to continue to bring you details from Nvidia's earnings call, the stock moving, as we've seen after hours, down right now about 2.5%. But first, the U.S. is looking ahead to a potential end of the war between Israel and Hamas. We'll discuss what that looks like with Barbara Leaf, former U.S. Assistant Secretary of State for Near Eastern Affairs. She's next on Balance of Power on Bloomberg TV and radio. It's Balance of Power on Bloomberg TV and radio. I'm Joe Matthew in Washington, watching shares of Nvidia tip lower in after-hours trading after giving a lukewarm revenue forecast in the fiscal third quarter. It's added to concerns that the pace of investment in AI is slowing. Yes, we've heard that before, but let's look at how markets are responding here and what we're learning on the conference call. In Power Moves with Bloomberg's Romaine Bostick, live from World Headquarters in New York. This is the big one, Romaine.
It is a big one, Joe. The shares have been under pressure since they released earnings a little more than an hour ago. The conference call started 30 minutes ago, but the first 30 minutes, it was just the executive speaking. Just a few seconds ago before you came back on the air, analysts now finally have a chance to start asking questions. The first question is really about the outlook for data center growth, and that has been the big story. For a company that has been growing at a headline revenue growth rate in the triple digits. We're talking about doubling, tripling revenue over the past few quarters. That growth rate is coming down pretty significantly to the 50% range. Normally, that wouldn't be cause for a concern, but that is the concern going forward here, Joe, and that is potentially going to have a bigger impact when we see the broader market open up tomorrow morning, because Nvidia has been more or less the stock that has driven the stock market gains basically since, well, you go back to November of 2022 when ChatGPT came into the public consciousness, Nvidia, the primary driver of those gains. But keep in mind, Joe, and I want to point your viewers here to a 10Q, a filing with the SEC that Nvidia did file, and they spend several pages talking about the regulatory issues that they're facing in the U.S., in China, in France, in Europe, basically across the globe. And they make it clear that one of the biggest threats to their business right now isn't so much about whether business customers continue buying their chips, but whether the governments around the world will continue to allow it to sell its chips in the way that it wants to do, particularly here in the U.S. And that announcement, Joe, that the president made just a few weeks ago, that it would let Nvidia sell its H20 chips to China, but it would take a 15% cut of revenue. Nvidia saying that's far from a done deal. They have not received formal guidance on exactly how that would work, and they are concerned about the potential that it would open itself up to litigation.
Yeah, that was incredible listening to you read the report as it came out, Romaine. That is a headline that argues with everything that we've heard from the White House. And of course, AMD was said to be a part of a very similar arrangement. Would that also suggest, and maybe part of the concern after hours here, that without that 15% arrangement, the licenses to sell H20s to China may be in doubt?
Absolutely. And we should point out in the most recent quarter, sales of H20 chips to China were basically zero. And that was expected because we knew that because of some of the Trump policies. But the expectation was that into this quarter and next quarter, we would start to see those sales picks up. And the company is saying that, look, it can maybe get to $2, maybe $5 billion in sales over there. But there's a huge question mark right now, not so much as to whether China would take those chips, and more importantly, whether President Trump and the White House will allow that to happen.
Fascinating. Bloomberg's Romaine Bostick. Great work after hours. We'll keep tabs on the stock for you. And breaking in the last hour, the new CDC director, Susan Monterez, is being ousted only weeks into her tenure, potentially adding instability to the Trump administration's public health policy. Joining us now with details, Bloomberg's Madison Muller in New York. Madison, what do we know about this, and how many leaders of the CDC have we seen in this administration?
Yeah, so Joe, this just comes on the heels of a lot of turmoil at HHS this year so far. We've seen, already a CDC nomination. Dave Weldon was pulled earlier this year, and it took a while to get someone else in there. Susan Monterez was only confirmed at the end of July, and for a while the CDC was actually without a director. And so there's been a lot of shakeups, obviously, at the various sub-agencies under HHS this year. We also saw the White House pull a U.S. Surgeon General nominee earlier this year and then replace her with someone else as well. And so there has been a lot of changes within the leadership. We don't know a ton yet about this situation. CDC director is newly a Senate-confirmed position, and so Susan Monterez actually had to go through a Senate confirmation process in order to get this position, and it is the President of the United States that would have to remove her or fire her or designate someone to fire her from this position. And so what we know right now is that there is a push to get rid of her, and the details from that are still emerging.
Wow. Does this go to court, or are we waiting to find that out?
We're waiting to find that out. I mean, RFK, who is the U.S. Health Secretary, cannot just fire her outright without having the White House being involved in this because of that Senate confirmation process, unless, the White House has sort of given him the go-ahead to be able to do this. And so we have to wait and see what happens, and this situation is just unfolding right now as we speak.
Well, we'd love to stay in touch with you on this one. Bloomberg's Madison Muller with the breaker at the CDC. We thank you so much. Turning now to the ongoing war between Israel and Hamas. Last night, in an interview on Fox News, President Trump's special envoy, Steve Witkoff, said the president will be hosting a big meeting soon to discuss a comprehensive day-after scenario, a plan for Gaza once the war concludes. But with major military activity still on the ground in Gaza, there are questions about whether this type of meeting is premature. Today on the early edition of Balance of Power, I asked Hagar Shamali about that, the former director for Syria and Lebanon in the National Security Council in the Obama administration, the significance in this case of this type of meeting. Here's what she said.
Anytime, again, you're doing day after, you're thinking about who's going to pick up the trash the next day. If Hamas is not governing, which is we've all seen, and the U.S. agrees with this, Israel is certainly pushing for this, it is not an option to have Hamas govern. So if Hamas is not governing, who is governing that would have the legitimacy and support from the people? How are you going to have functioning schools, water, hospitals, all that stuff? And what is the role of the United States in that?
Joining us now on Balance of Power on Bloomberg TV and radio with her analysis, Barbara Leaf, former U.S. Assistant Secretary of State for Near Eastern Affairs in the Biden administration and distinguished diplomatic fellow at the Middle East Institute. It's great to have you with us here, Barbara. What are your thoughts initially on a day-after plan? We've heard a lot of rhetoric from this president, including the idea of leveling Gaza, removing everyone who lives there, and creating waterfront condos. I'm assuming that's not what we're talking about here.
No, indeed, it's not. And look, a couple thoughts, Joe. First of all, the U.S. has focused, first the Biden administration, now the Trump administration. The U.S. began focusing on these questions of what happens after the war is over as early as late October, early November of 2023. We began talking to Israeli counterparts in the military, in the Ministry of Defense, security services, and the Prime Minister about how to prod them to really articulate, to think about what would come afterwards. And it was a very frustrating, series of discussions over the course of a year, which really went nowhere. I, for one, am very glad to hear that the Trump administration, that President Trump has gathered people together today for a series of discussions. But we are nearly 2 years into this conflict, so it's long overdue. I don't believe for a moment that we're talking about or envisioning something like the February 2025 notion of the U.S. taking over Gaza and essentially pushing Palestinians out to somewhere else and building some sort of Riviera. It's not tenable.
There are questions about rebuilding Gaza, which may be for another day, because we have to talk about what's going on now. I realize that a day after plan is necessary, but the fighting endures, and in many cases, the starving endures in Gaza. You were a key advisor to Secretary Blinken following the attack on October 7, and we're still having the same conversation about how to get food into Gaza. This is something that is not getting easier. It is, in fact, getting harder. You tried to even build a pier at one point in your administration. What can the Trump White House do to get around these obstacles?
So, look, first of all, it was the pier was almost, in a sense, a move of desperation, as were the airdrops. Really, what you need to do is open up every land crossing possible and surge aid in. We were never able to get our Israeli partners to do that on a constant, ongoing basis, and it was always tied to the prospect of a surge tied to the next phase of a hostage deal. But the fact is that is wholly insufficient, because you went from December in 2023 to fully a year later before there was another such release. That's unsustainable. It's untenable. And so really there is nothing to prevent the Israeli government from surging aid on an ongoing basis. And you can do that deconflicting with your military operations as you go.
Interesting. With that in mind here, the president's going to be talking, of course.
Joe, I'm sorry, if I could add, that is one way to overwhelm Hamas's ability, or frankly, criminals' ability to steal assistance. You surge it, you have it coming in 4 or 5 different crossings, and it becomes pretty impossible for it to be looted or controlled by an organization like Hamas. It gets to people.
We're hearing some new blowback from Democrats on Capitol Hill about the policy. And by the way, it's not going to sound unfamiliar to you. President Joe Biden heard quite a bit of blowback from progressives here in Washington and around the country when it came to supporting the military effort on Israel's behalf, and specifically providing weapons systems. The ranking member, the top Democrat on the House Armed Services Committee, Adam Smith, is calling now on Congress to withhold some weapons shipments from Israel to create more leverage over Benjamin Netanyahu. Would it actually work?
Look, I think there are tools, there is leverage to be used by President Trump that comes well before you turn to something as dramatic as curtailing arms shipments. He has that leverage now in his relationship with Prime Minister Netanyahu.
It's great to have you with us, Barbara. Thanks for joining. Barbara Leaf is former U.S. Assistant Secretary of State for Near Eastern Affairs in the Biden administration, distinguished diplomatic fellow at the Middle East Institute. Ambassador, thank you. Coming up on Balance of Power, a make or break moment here for the world's most valuable company. It's happening as we speak. Nvidia's earnings call underway right now after disappointing results. Highlights next on Balance of Power on Bloomberg TV and radio. This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg TV and radio. I'm Joe Matthew. Thanks for joining us. We'll turn back to our coverage of Nvidia's quarterly earnings up ahead, and we'll assemble our panel as well. But first, the stories we're watching in today's Power Brief. 2 children, ages 8 and 10, were killed in a shooting at a Minneapolis Catholic church that was holding a mass for elementary school students today. The gunman fired dozens of rounds through the windows at people sitting in pews and injured an additional 17 people, including 14 children, 2 now in critical condition, according to the Minneapolis police chief. Authorities say the gunman is dead, and there is no ongoing threat to the community. Minnesota Governor Tim Walz and President Trump have each been briefed on the shooting. The president commenting on Truth Social, saying he is praying for everyone involved. A smaller group of Americans will be eligible to receive updated versions of the COVID vaccine this fall. FDA says people 65 and older and those with underlying conditions that put them at higher risk of COVID are eligible to receive the shot. People over 6 months old who do not fall into that category can still get the vaccine with the approval of a doctor. Health and Human Services Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. confirming the new guidance on X today, saying the American people demanded science, safety, and common sense. This framework delivers all three. Novavax, Pfizer, and Moderna finished modestly higher on this news. And what's old is new again at Cracker Barrel. The company's stock up almost 8% just a day after a major reversal to scrap its new logo and return to its vintage look in the face of mounting criticism and even pressure from President Trump. The restaurant chain saying, "We thank our guests for sharing your voices and love for Cracker Barrel. We said we would listen, and we have." The White House today taking credit for reviving Uncle Herschel. Took liberty to release its own version of the logo, complete with Donald Trump sitting in Uncle Herschel's place next to a barrel of oil. Joining us now with their reaction to this story and more, this evening's political panel. Rob Waters is back, Republican strategist, managing partner at the Madison Group, alongside Democratic strategist Kristen Hahn, partner at Rock Solutions. It's great to see you both here. I'm guessing, Rob Waters, you sat on the rocking chairs on the porch at a Cracker Barrel. What do you make of it?
That is some of the best baked apple you will ever have. And those hash browns could be a little crispier, but darn good.
All right. See, there you have it. Maybe you'll want to go for the chicken fried steak.
No,
Kristen,
it's the chicken and dumplings.
Everyone's got an answer.
It's true.
What do you call this? Is Donald Trump the chairman of every corporate board?
No, I call this a woke agenda that's 2 years too late.
There's the Trump version. What do you think of the new logo?
Cool. I was busy working today. But seriously, why do you change? Don't fix what ain't broken.
Okay, that's fine.
There it is.
But should the commander-in-chief be part of this process?
I mean, I think that there's a lot of things going on here. I mean, the president is injecting himself in a lot of different ways into a lot of these companies, into the private sector. And, if it were a Democrat in office, we'd call it socialism. But, he's talking about the marketing. But, the power of the presidency, the power of the bully pulpit, they're afraid of what he might do when they come after him. So, let's change the logo back, immediately. I'm not sure that I would recommend that my client do that.
The new look, the new streamlined logo. Don Jr. was tweeting about it. Is this a political story or not?
But if Don Jr. and the president say it's woke, it's woke.
Yeah,
when Wendy's decided to change their logo and change the look of Wendy, nobody said anything then. I don't know. He just picks and chooses and then tweets about it. Then he tweets about it and then people are very concerned about what he has to say, because he's the president of the United States and he is looking at all these companies and injecting himself into the process.
Well, the next layer here is the Intel stake. As a conservative Republican, how do you feel about the government taking a stake in this company? Does it feel like President Obama taking a stake in GM?
Chrysler bailout or something?
I was just about to go there.
I'm going to put it this way. I would much rather us have an equity position where there's a payback, unlike other areas of too big to fail, which, paid back without an ROI. So I think if we can preserve our domestic quantity of chip making and bring it back over here and get an ROI on it, it's not that bad a deal.
Well, there's always talk about picking winners, as we heard again in the Obama administration.
I'm on Bloomberg, brother. I know what a winner looks like.
Solyndra wasn't a winner. And Intel, by the way, is a company that's struggling to keep up with the times. Is that the one we want to invest in?
I mean, it's not the Kodak of our time, if that's what you're asking.
Well, I don't know.
Time will tell. I think we need to preserve our chip-making process. We can't rely upon allies of spherical influence near China. And, we're just going to see what we do, right?
I want to ask you both about Lisa Cook. We talked to Peter Navarro and had quite a conversation about a number of things here, and Ty Cobb as well, as the president tries to become the first president of the United States to fire a Fed governor. This is a pretty remarkable moment. And we heard from Kevin Hassett this morning. They've got all the economic voices out on this. He talked about this, of course, director of the National Economic Council, about what he believes Lisa Cook should do in the meantime. Listen.
The president absolutely has authority to fire a Fed governor for cause. And I think the accusations are serious. And I look forward to seeing the outcome. If I were her in her circumstance, I would take leave right now. I think it's the honorable thing to do.
Should she recuse herself? There's a practice in Washington when, you're accused of something, you write the resignation letter and you let the boss decide. Kristen?
No, I mean, I think that she's got, I mean, there are questions to be answered, you know, and I think she should. But in the meantime, there are political considerations I think the president's making. And he clearly wants his own governors in there. And he's said as much. Like, you know, once we get more people in there, I think it'll be better. I think that she has every right to fight it. Throughout the process in the court, she's going to have to, you know, things are going to be revealed. And either, you know, it wasn't malfeasance or it was. But she has the right to due process. And right now, she's not convicted of anything. Therefore, he doesn't have the right to fire her. It'd be interesting when it goes to the Supreme Court, I'm assuming it will, and what the court will say. So, yeah, should go through the process, but she has a right to have an attorney.
You'd stay and fight, though, is your answer.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
So we talked to Ty Cobb about this. Let's ask the lawyer at the table. Trump versus Wilcox. Didn't the Supreme Court already give us a sense of how it feels about this?
I mean, look, if she did what they say she did, big if, Abby Lowell's fabulous lawyer, you know, I used to work for him, so then she has to go. If she didn't, then she doesn't. Where's the question?
Well, I don't know. I asked Peter Navarro that. He said there is no need for due process. The documents are there, and she can be fired for
There's
cause.
always a need for due process in the United States of America.
Well, I like the spirit of that idea. Will she get it?
I think so.
Yeah.
I think so. I think, you know, you've seen places where the courts have ruled against Trump, even recently. So I would hope so. The second that we don't have due process in the United States of America, I'm going to be very concerned.
You're sensitive to the markets. Do you worry about the politicization of the Fed becoming a reality?
No, I think the Fed's an independent agency and will react as such. And I don't. I have more worry about y'all talking about Nvidia as much as you do than I do actually the Fed hitting
policy. The statement that came from the Fed today said as much.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, you know, the courts will look into this and it will play out. But at the end of the day, we are an independent agency.
Fantastic.
So at the end of the day, process is process, right?
Due process, says Kristen Hahn and Rob Waters. This was a great panel. Thank you both so much for the insights. And boy, Rob just knows where we're going here. The Nvidia earnings call is still going on. CEO Jensen Huang is weighing in right now on the importance of China for the company. Close co-host Romaine Bostick is back with us from World Headquarters in New York. Romaine, what are we hearing?
Yeah, I hope I don't disappoint Rob here, but that conference call is going on. The question and answer session is underway, and as expected, most of the questions are about the company's exposure to China. The company made clear that its sales to China, particularly for those higher-end H20 chips, basically flat. They did have revenue in the greater China space, and this includes Hong Kong, of roughly about $2.7 billion. But just a couple of quarters ago, it was double that. And the company says that if it is granted a license by the United States to sell its chips to China in the way that it wants to, that could mean $50 billion in revenue just for the rest of this year alone. But that is a big if, and the company is being very careful to say that this is not a forecast, and they make it clear that the, quote, geopolitical issues out there right now are holding it back, but that it is ready to move forward with those sales if it can get permission from the Trump administration. The shares are lower here in the after-hours trade, but I also want to turn your attention to the shares of other companies in this space also moving lower, like AMD, like Broadcom, Marvell, and Qualcomm as well. A few bright spots out there, though, Joe. Intel, believe it or not, is indicated potentially to move higher when we get to the cash session tomorrow. And for our viewers, just a reminder that futures do reopen in just about 5 minutes' time here in the U.S., and you'll get a broader look here at where the broader market goes tomorrow.
So we're not dumping the stock here, Romaine. I mean, we've seen worse reactions to Nvidia earnings, and we were near an all-time high going into this report. We could actually say that the stock's holding up pretty well considering these headlines, right?
Still holding up. Still one of the best performing stocks of the year. By far, one of the best performing stocks over the last 2 to 3 years, Joe. So let's be clear here. A 3% pullback is not a real sell-off for a stock of this size. But when we talk about this company being important to the market, we also have to point out that it has become a political football. And how Jensen Huang is able to navigate this is going to be important. He does say on the conference call, as does the CFO, that they are working with the Trump administration. And we should also point out, Joe, that it's not just the United States. They're facing issues from the Chinese government, from the French government, the German government, and et cetera here. So this is a company that, well, quite frankly, would just like to sell its chips to whoever wants it. But you have a lot of governments right now standing in its way.
Isn't that the truth? We'll keep our eyes on this stock throughout the after-hours session. Bloomberg's Romaine Bostick. We'll have a lot to talk about on this front tomorrow as well. Romaine, thank you for your coverage. In the meantime, check out the Washington Edition newsletter. A lot to unpack today. You can find it on the terminal and online. And that does it for us for now. I'll meet you back here tomorrow on Balance of Power. I'm Joe Matthew in Washington. Have a great evening. This is Bloomberg TV and Radio.